Welcome, students. This is Module 1.3.6, Community Ecology, Species Interactions 2. Last time we talked about the species interaction of competition in which both species are harmed by the presence of the other. In this interaction, predation, we're going to discuss the case when the predator is benefited by the presence of the prey and the prey is harmed by the presence of the predator. As you can see in this photograph, it's very clear. This shows a mountain lion, a fit-looking predator, and this is an old mountain lion kill, a deer that was killed in the Huachuca Mountains. Of course, because predation has such a profound effect, it can shape populations in a very strong way. And so we call this top-down control, and it turns out that numbers of predators, population levels of predators, may track the population of prey in a cyclic manner. A great example of this is the Canadian lynx and the snowshoe hare. And here is a graph which shows just that relationship. You can see the prey in the blue, and that the predator tracks it. And you might be looking at the years of this data going, wow, how did they get that information? They actually did it from the Hudson Bay Company, and it was buying hides, buying the skins of hares and lynxes. And so we could see that the numbers corresponded very closely. And of course, recent modern studies have borne out this relationship as well. Now, closely related to predation is the interaction that we call herbivory. It is similar in that the herbivore benefits from the presence of the plant, but the plant is harmed from the presence of the herbivore. So it's a plus-minus interaction. You can see here on the left, this shows a deer browsing, feeding on the leaves of a woody plant. Grazing is feeding on a non-woody plant. And you might not think of this as herbivory, but here's a leafcutter ant taking a little piece of leaf that will go back to the nest, and it will grow fungus, and then the ants actually eat the fungus, but they still are consuming the plant. Now, just as predation can have a very profound effect on the prey, so herbivores can have a profound effect on the plants. And so as a consequence, both groups have developed defense mechanisms. And this is, again, because of the dramatic effects that can happen. Some examples of defenses are plant defenses against herbivores include morphological defenses. We're talking about anatomical defenses, such as the development of spines, and we'll talk about those later. Chemical defenses, putting toxic or unpalatable chemicals into the leaves of plants, can certainly reduce the number that are eaten by herbivores. Animals have also developed defenses against animal predators, and again, these can be chemical defenses, skin toxins and such, and defensive coloration, mimicry, and these are just a few. This is not a comprehensive list by any means. But here we can look first at some of the plant defenses. This is a tree that grows in South America, and look at that. Boy, it would be very difficult to climb up the trunk of that tree. So the spines on the trunk of this tree is thought to help protect it from monkeys and from sloths. Here is a sloth. A sloth won't jump from one tree to the other, so it's a very good defense against sloths. A monkey could climb up a tree next to it and jump across. But here locally in southeastern Arizona, most of the plants have some kind of spines or something like that. Just think of the very common mesquite tree with the big spines it gets. If you've ever pruned a mesquite tree and then looked at it several months later, often the new growth that responds after a dramatic cutting, and that cutting is in some ways analogous to herbivory, and the response of the plant is the new growth has a lot more spines. It's kind of interesting. Here's a very important fact here on this slide. It says, to be effective, spines and thorns need only slow the rate of herbivory, not stop it completely. And that's an important thing to remember, because even though a plant with spines still suffers some herbivory, it slows the losses to acceptable levels. So the plant still has enough energy to produce flowers and fruits and seeds. Another category of defenses that plants have developed are chemical defenses, and it's kind of interesting. Insect herbivores go one of two ways, it seems like. It seems like either they're generalists, like a grasshopper that will feed on leaves from a number of different plants, or else they can be specialists. And here we can see a specialist here, cabbage butterfly. It feeds only on members of one plant family, the mustard family. And the mustard family contains mustard oils. And you may have heard of mustard. For example, the first chemical weapon used was mustard gas in World War I, and it's derived from this plant. But this particular insect has developed the metabolic ability to neutralize the mustard oils, and so it feeds with impunity on the mustard plant. Very interesting. And this is a pattern that we do often see, that plants may have some very strong toxins, but there is typically one insect lineage or another, one insect species or another that figures it out, that has evolved a way to overcome that strong defense. Now, here's an example of an animal that's defending itself against predators. This is a small frog that lives in South America. It's called the poison arrow or the poison dart frog because indigenous peoples actually use the secretions from the skins of these frogs to put on their projectiles, their little arrows. They have really reduced bows and arrows that they shoot this little poison dart into their prey, but the toxins are so effective that they can bring down large animals. It says here in the caption that some are so toxic that a few micrograms will kill a person if injected into the bloodstream. And researchers are trying to use this in neuromuscular research, just small amounts in the unique chemicals. Here's an example of defensive coloration of animals. Can you see the animal here? Right here where the cursor is, that is a caterpillar, and it looks very much like a twig. And we haven't really studied evolution yet, but it is an interesting thing to consider. How did a caterpillar come to resemble a twig? And it's as simple as this, that the caterpillars that looked just a little bit more like a twig suffered just a little bit less predation, and as a consequence, they left more offspring. And so in the next generation, there were more caterpillars that looked a little bit more like a twig, and so on and so forth through many hundreds of generations until we have caterpillars that look quite closely like a twig. Here's an example of prey camouflage. In the center, I selected this photograph because this is a bird we're looking at called the American bittern. It is a wading bird, and it has this distinctive behavior that when it's threatened, it puts its head up and it holds very still. Now, the photographs flanking the center photograph both have one American bittern. Here is one right here. I'm going to put the cursor pointing right at the eye, and there's the tip of the beak right there. So there's one American bittern, and the body goes down here. The second one is right here. Here's its breast, here's its eye, and its beak is right here. And what is really interesting about this behavior is that when the wind blows the reeds, the American bittern moves in concert with the wind. It's really quite interesting to watch. And the thing about the bittern is it will do this whether it's in yellow, dry reeds or green reeds. And in green reeds, it really stands out. So it's not a very good defense in that circumstance. Here's another example of prey camouflage. These are plants. These are members of the genus Lithops. These are stone plants, and they grow in southern Africa, in the Kalahari Desert, and other places as well. Very interesting kind of plants. These are being grown in cultivation. This is like grown in a greenhouse in a pot. And these are two leaves, and the little lines that look like cracks on the top here, those are actually transparent, and it allows light to go down inside these thick, fleshy leaves, and inside there's green chlorophyll, and photosynthesis occurs. And this is because if these plants are growing out on the dry desert floor, and they're green, the herbivores see them and go right to them. Here is a photograph of lithops growing wild in southern Africa. Here is a circle around. It shows that there are 3 of those plants right there. Pretty amazing stuff, really. Here's a case of mimicry. Mimicry is another defense that happens because of predation. On the left, we have the monarch butterfly. This is a butterfly that feeds on milkweed. Milkweed contains chemicals which are poisonous. These chemicals are called cardiac glycosides, and the larva feeds on them. That is, a caterpillar feeds on them, and it stores them in the body, and when it transforms into an adult, the adult butterfly still has these toxic chemicals, and so if an animal eats it, it gets the effect of eating these very toxic chemicals. On the right is a butterfly which mimics the monarch. It's called the viceroy. Its caterpillar does not feed on this, and the adult does not have cardiac glycosides sequestered away, hidden away. It's a very interesting kind of thing. So this provides a good defense against birds. For when a bird eats a monarch, it will never again eat anything that looks like it, even a viceroy. And there have been studies done of just this kind of thing, where birds are first offered a monarch and they eat it. They have a very adverse effect in which they regurgitate and they have heart palpitations. And then they're offered a viceroy, and they will not eat the viceroy butterfly. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Here is some more mimicry. On the upper left is, I've labeled it a dangerous yellow jacket. Dangerous because it has a sting. And down in the lower right, that is in fact a beetle, not a wasp at all. It looks very much like a wasp, but it doesn't have a sting. It's not capable of stinging. And so mimicry is another response to the strong evolutionary pressures that predation puts upon prey populations. And that concludes this module.